Hello and welcome to Greenbytes Wednesdays. Greenbytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations and steer consciousness when it comes to understanding the impact of our digital footprint across Nigeria's technology ecosystem. We hope that with this advanced knowledge, we can introduce you to some tools, trends, and best practices that can enhance your knowledge about digital sustainability. Are you curious about climate change? Are you a tech enthusiast or a climate entrepreneur? Come on board and learn on this episode as we get on with every conversation of the Greenbytes Wednesday podcast series. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote, and I am glad to be your host. Welcome on board. Research plays a very important role when it comes to advancing sustainability. And this could be in providing evidence for policymakers. It could be in identifying the risks and opportunities when it comes to how we advance digital innovation or how we use energy in smarter ways. It could also be in designing or mapping out how we can truly see that sustainable outcomes are evident in all that we do. And that's why today we delve into the topic, the role of research in advancing sustainability. And we will look at this through the context of digital and the energy sectors. Welcome to Greenbytes Wednesdays. This is a podcast where we facilitate critical conversations and we steer within you, the listener, the consciousness when it comes to our digital footprint here in Nigeria and also the technology landscape generally. What are the progress being made? How does these technology or digital innovations impact on the environment? What are the tools? What are the trends that is facilitating digital sustainability? Those are the conversations we have on Greenbytes Wednesdays. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote, and it's a pleasure to be your host on this podcast. Feel free to check out other episodes. We have them on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, wherever it is you find your podcast, you definitely can find Greenbytes Wednesdays also. We want to say thank you to the UK government for making it possible for us to bring you this edition and many other editions that you may have been learning from, and remember to share with people in your network. Right now, we delve into the conversation. My guest is Dr. Sylvanus Barnabas. We've had him as a guest before, and it's such a privilege to have him on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesdays. Dr. Barnabas, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure indeed. Like I said earlier, when it comes to research, we sometimes underestimate the importance or the impact that research has in advancing sustainability. And here in Nigeria particularly, we think of how, like I said, it could be in identifying the risk or the opportunities that are in different sectors. Specifically, we look at the digital and the energy sector here. But also it could be in terms of policy guidance. How can research really guide or shape the policies that are out there? It could also be, when we look at it on a broader scale, how we contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or even how research at the local level can be connected to global challenges across the world. That's going to be the focus of today's conversation. And once again, I want to say thank you very much, Dr. Sylvanus Barnabas, my guest. He is a senior lecturer at Nile University, Nigeria, where he's been teaching environmental law, amongst other themes when it comes to law. He has a bachelor's and master's in law, and he has a PhD in international human rights law. It is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Dr. Barnabas.
Thank you once more.
Yes. So let me start from the very basics. Why would you say, or maybe not to put words in your mouth, would you say that research is sort of at the cornerstone, like a very landmark issue when it comes to how we advance sustainability?
All right. I think to answer the question, perhaps I should begin by recalling a saying that there is no problem so big or complicated enough that can withstand the constant assault of critical thinking. So what that suggests is that there's practically no problem, no challenge that faces humanity that cannot be resolved via research. Now, having said that, in the context of our discussion, the significance, the impact, or the role of research when it comes to sustainability, particularly in the ICT sector, I would say the significance can never be overemphasized. First and foremost, research is needed in order to produce the knowledge, the expertise, the products, and the services that are necessary in order to reduce our digital footprints. So, in practical terms, the significance of research in the context of sustainability in the ICT sector come in several ways. First, in terms of the production of more eco-friendly products. I'm talking here, say, for example, computers, parts of computers. We're talking about computer screens. We're talking about processors. So investing in research in the ICT sector in this area could help manufacturers or producers in the productions of these gadgets, parts of these gadgets that are more environmentally friendly. That is to say, for example, products or parts that consume energy less. So if you're using devices that consume less energy, that implies that we are also reducing the things like the consumption of fossil fuels. Sometimes we need petrol and all sort of fossil fuels in order to power our generator, in order to use our electronic devices.
Yes.
So the lesser power they consume, the lesser our reliance on things like fossil fuel that contribute to the emission of greenhouse gases. That is one of the core causes of climate change, for example. The other way in which research can be very significant or useful in this context is through providing more avenues for managing more efficient avenues or more responsible avenues about how we manage the waste, the e-waste, the digital waste. When we purchase these products, when we purchase these digital services or electronic services and use them to the point where it begins to appear as if they are arriving at their end of life. That is to say, they are arriving at the point in which we're going to dispose of them. How then do we deal with them at that point? Research is needed. It is research that helps to highlight ways in which we can manage this waste in a responsible way so that they do not have a negative impact on the environment. And then I come to the issue, the contemporary issue of this idea of a circular economy.
Yeah.
So in the context of the ICT, research is significant in terms of showing ways in which, in the specific context of the information and communication technology sector, how we can create, say for example in Nigeria, a circular economy in that context. Meaning a situation where there is no waste, no digital products end up as waste. No electronic device ever ends up as waste. So we have a cycle. You can imagine a cycle. So we have digital devices that move in a cycle round. They never have an end of life situation. That's what we call a digital economy. And it is only when we invest in various areas of research that we can do that. That is another significance of research in the context of reducing our footprints in the digital sector. But there is also one significant aspect. Research also helps policy makers, lawmakers in generating policies and laws that are based on evidence. So, for example, there's a research output that comes out with statistics that in a particular ICT sector or in a particular region of Nigeria, the manner in which ICT products are consumed is generating so and so percentage of waste. That then becomes a raw material, quote unquote, for policymakers to know how they can regulate that sector based on evidence that has been generated as a result of research.
Great, absolutely. So to put it in very direct terms, yes, research is sort of at the cornerstone of advancements. And if I hear you well, not just within the sustainability or the ICT sector, but you said even when it comes to existence as a human. Let's bring it home. Would you say Nigeria is doing a lot of research when it comes to digital ICT sector and how we work towards efficient energy use or develop new sources of energy?
At the minute, it wouldn't be completely true to say Nigeria is doing nothing. We have an agency called the Nigerian NITDA, Nigerian Institute for Technology Development Agency.
Yeah.
So, and that has been doing its bit in terms of regulating the ICT sector. In the specific context of driving sustainability in the ICT sector, the government does have NESDRA, that is the agency responsible for regulation and enforcement. Yes, in the context of the environment in Nigeria. It has a regulation in the context of managing digital waste. Like every other problem, every other sector in Nigeria, the problem we have is enforcement. So the point I make is that there are miniature attempts in Nigeria by the Nigerian government, and I have to add even in the private sector, in the context of responsible waste management, but more needs to be done in the context of research. In practical terms, I mean funding individuals. There are a lot of young people out there who are ready to go pursue postgraduate research degrees in various parts of the world in this area. Make those funds available. There are academics in the university. I am an environmental lawyer. I am interested in the law, policies, and regulations in relation to the sustainable and responsible management of digital waste in this country. I'm a lawyer, but there are also scientists, there are environmental scientists out there, and there are people in various sectors who are interested. Where is the funding? So more funding needs to be provided for people like that in order to enhance.
There. Just before we go into the funding part, which we'll delve into in a bit, I think I want you to bring this sort of closer to the space you work. You work in the educational space.
That's correct.
And I understand that year in, year out, you have hundreds of graduates who sort of do research. There could be miniature, as you call them, very small basic research. But then to what extent can we see this useful? To what extent are this research not just items on the desk or hiding somewhere in some computer drives? How are we giving them life in advancing development in Nigeria?
Well, even as I speak,
if there is any.
Yeah, even as I speak, I have a preponderance of the postgraduate students that I supervise at the minute who are writing in the area of sustainability are focusing on sustainability in the ICT sector. In fact, many have even gone to look at the significance of artificial intelligence in the context of driving sustainability in the ICT sector. From a legal and policy point of view, that in itself is a positive. The fact that we have people, we have Nigerians, we have students in this country who are interested in this sector is a positive in itself. in terms of these academic works, not just lying there and nobody ever getting to read that. Somebody wants it. Of what significance if it's a book if nobody ever gets to read it? Yeah. So that implies that whatever thing is done at the academic level needs to have some practical manifestation. This is where support is then needed. Where a student, for example, produces a dissertation, say for example a PhD dissertation, where such student propounds an original idea that can lead to innovations in the ICT sector in the context of responsibility in handling digital waste, for example. Where is the support within the Nigerian system to enable such a student to practicalize whatever they may have developed in theory? As I speak, I do not know of any. So more needs to be done in this aspect. It's not just students, they are academics who are constantly doing research, who are constantly publishing articles, but these issues end up at the level of theory, at the level of academia. So support needs to be provided by the relevant agencies in government to such people in order to practicalize these ideas. So, for example, funding, some sort of small scheme loans could be established for people who have developed this kind of ideas in an academic context to bring them into practice.
Great. You talk a lot about funding, so maybe we should delve into it. And I know one very big part of when it comes to funding and research, one is first in making this research open source such that people can find it and they can discover what is being done by different people, particularly in Nigeria. And thereafter, how can we then fund? How can we see that we put structures or mobilize resources to do this? So my question is two parts. First, in terms of accessibility of the research that has been made, how accessible would you say that this, as you call it, preponderous research are for people that want to delve into it? The second part will be around how accountability with the funds. I understand very clearly too that people would rather, from the Western part, for example, would rather take interest in a topic and have a local person, a Nigerian, as a second author, but they control the finances, control the direction through which the research goes, through which the research outcomes are used. So are there questions around the accountability within the research sector that has made it difficult for us to continually attract funds to sort of translate research from not just text to actual on-the-ground solutions? So it's a two-part question.
Yes, I'll begin with the last. There's a saying that charity begins at home. So we have a situation now in the world where nations are particularly more interested in treating matters domestically. So, for example, you have a researcher in the United Kingdom who's come up with a similar idea. He's brought up an idea that can bring about responsible and sustainable use of digital devices. And you have another researcher, say for example in Nigeria, who is produced, and the two abroad are competing for funding. And I'm giving an example, a hypothetical example. And a government of the United Kingdom is wanting to provide funding. The other person in the United Kingdom has his case study in the United Kingdom. The person in Nigeria has his case study in Nigeria. Naturally, the UK government will want to fund the person in the United Kingdom. But when there's extra fund, then there could be a tendency to fund the person in Nigeria. The point I'm trying to make is that if the funding is available domestically to practicalize some of these ideas or to support people who have generated ideas that will contribute positively to sustainability in the ICT sector, then we don't have to look abroad. Now to the issue of accountability. Are there issues of accountability? I do not think so. Because most funders in the academic context, most people who fund research in the academic context already have prior established mechanisms for monitoring not just the progress of the research, but also the usage of the funding that has been made available for the research. So there are predetermined audit processes to check this issue of lack of transparency in the management of the funds that might be provided to support such research. So where I think problem lies is in our ability, those of us in the developing world, to access these fundings that are out there. The skills are not there. You need a lot of skills to be able to access this funding, to make applications for this funding, to know how to compose your applications for this funding, and in fact, to even know where to go to search for this funding. That's where the biggest problem lies. I do not think that there's a lot of issue to do with the issue of accountability per se. We live in an age where one of the biggest challenges facing mankind is climate change. Year in, year out. The Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change gather in various parts of the world to contribute ideas about how best, first, to generate the funding on how to tackle climate change, and also about modalities about how best to adapt to climate change or mitigate our emission of greenhouse gases in order to combat climate change. So that also means that there is a corresponding availability of a substantial amount of funding out there in the context of sustainability. The challenge is just that technical support isn't there. Information, they say, is power. Most people who have this interest, who have this desire, who have the skills and ability to embark on this kind of research do not have the information. And even when they do not have the skills. They do not know how do I apply for this funding. They do not know. So therein, for me, lies the basic problem. So at the global level, at an international level, there is availability of funding in this sector because it's a global challenge that is facing mankind. At the domestic level, I believe that more could be done in terms of availability of funding before we even start talking about the issue of transparency. You see, when Nigeria needed it in the petroleum sector, or we needed to produce researchers, or we needed to produce a skilled workforce for the petroleum sector, what did we do? Nigeria established something called the Petroleum Technology Development Trust Fund, PTDF. I think it is high time that we develop a sustainability development trust fund in this country in order to generate funding and support researchers and academics who are willing to embark on further research and generate ideas that can help us reduce our carbon footprints in the context of this discussion in the ICT sector, but also reducing the negative impact of our unsustainable behavior on the society in general.
Great. That's an indigenous idea to have a sustainability development trust fund. And you talk a little bit about climate finance. For example, at COP29 in Baku, I know that the commitments from developed countries was raised to as much as $300 billion US, even though scientists and civil society think the figure should be somewhere around $1.3 billion. But let's get back to this first part of the question that I asked you, if you remember, which was around open source for research that have been done. How accessible are this research that have been done? Like you say, there are some great research that have been done, but are they available? Are they on open source? How can people find them?
Yes. Let me answer that by, first and foremost, laying emphasis on the fact that it is very expensive for academics to publish their research outputs in open access. It's very expensive. There are not many. I think practically, probably just 1% of academics in Nigeria can publish their research outputs open access. In the developed world, and I can speak for the United Kingdom, where I did research at postgraduate levels, when academics, and in this context I'm talking about academics within in the employment of a university, when they publish or make their research available open access, it is the institution that pays. The institution pays because the amounts are high. To publish an article open access, as I speak, the average price you have to pay for such publication is between $2,000 and $2,500. Convert that to pounds.
Convert it to naira.
An academic produces research outputs, 5 or 10 research outputs in a year on how to use AI to reduce energy consumption in computers, for example. And he produces them in various areas of computer usage. The thing is, where does it get the money to make this, to publish these research outcomes open access so that anybody can access them? Where's the money? How many institutions? I'm answering you by asking a question, a rhetorical question. How many institutions in Nigeria sponsor their academics or support them in order to make their research, the outcomes of their research, available openly for the general public? No. What is freely available is just normal publication where whoever wants to access the publication will have to go and pay. So that is the challenge that we encounter in Nigeria, in the specific context of Nigeria today. So more could be done, particularly, say, for the Ministry of Education, to bring about policies so as to compel tertiary institutions in Nigeria to find a way of supporting their academics financially to make their research available in an open access context, because this then benefits the entire society, because when academics are able to make their research outcomes available openly, it means that the general public can also access them openly and freely. So, in a nutshell, make the funding available, and researchers in Nigeria will make their research outcomes also openly available freely for the Nigerian public.
Yeah, it seems like we cannot talk about research without making this emphasis on funding. But away from funding, do you think that there is a role that citizen participation can play in sort of advancing research? And I ask this question because for the listener out there, it's probably not a government staff, it's probably not in the development space, not a researcher, but he's really passionate and feels like, how can I really do something? So what's the criticalness of citizen participation in this conversation?
Yeah, very critical. Very critical. First, in helping to put pressure on government to provide the necessary avenues for researchers to be able to generate more ideas to promote sustainability in the ICT sector and in the other sectors in the society. That's one. Two, it is part and parcel of democracy. The more aware the citizenry are, the more the possibility that the society can move in a trajectory of general environmental sustainability. Because person A could just be an ordinary citizen today, but that same person A could be a minister of environment tomorrow. So the more the citizens participate in this idea of encouraging researchers, the government encouraging the researchers, the society encouraging researchers, that can play a significant role in terms of a positive impact, in terms of increase in supporting researchers for developing ideas, generating ideas, and publishing ideas in the area of sustainability. There is also the issue of having a very skilled and conscious workforce. And in this context, I'm talking about the private sector. Because when you talk about the general public, you're talking about you're talking about people who are working in the public sector, you're talking about people who are also working in the private sector, we're talking about people who do not even work at all. But in the context of the private sector, when you have a citizenry that participates in this context, that means that in the private sector, you could have employees who are giving positive feedback to their employers in order to encourage their employers in the private sector to support researchers to do research, to conduct research, to generate ideas, to publish ideas that are relevant in the context of sustainability or responsible use of our ICT products and services. So on the whole, when you have a society where you have people at the general level who are positive in the context of sustainability, the need to generate ideas to encourage more sustainability, the need to encourage those who are at the level of governance to enhance sustainability through research, then you see that there is a multiplier effect. This is why at that party, you see that at the heart of that party is sustainability, issues that have to do with sustainability. If you go to the United States, it's a similar thing. And most parts of the developed world, you see that there are parties, political parties, the Green Party. You know that at the epicenter of this political party is something to do with. So that is the kind of, that is a replica of the significance of public participation in this kind of issues.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Barnabas. I've been speaking with Dr. Sylvanus Barnabas, a senior lecturer at Nile University, where he's been teaching and working and researching in environmental law, amongst other aspects of law. And we've been talking about the role of research when it comes to advancing sustainability in the ICT sector, in digitizing Nigeria, and also in the energy space. We've spoken a lot about, open access research. We've spoken a lot about funding. We've spoken a lot about the role of citizens. So you will think, okay, I'm just an ordinary guy. We've sort of delved into what roles you can play when it comes to advancing sustainability issues. The second part of this conversation, we'll talk a little bit about, and I know you've talked about research in the AI sector. You've talked about research when it comes to the materials that is being used in developing digital tools. You also talked about the energy consumption of digital tools that we have. But I really want to know, are there still other areas that you think, if we had to prioritize research in advancing sustainability in Nigeria, then these are the areas for us to look at or to sort of take as priority?
Yes. I will begin by saying that we need to imbibe what I refer to as in the particular context of the ICT sector, imbibe the ideas of, at the national level, at the state level, local government level, but also as the private sector level. Learn how to do something called as life cycle assessment for certain devices that are used in the ICT sector. You take device A, say for example a laptop computer, I don't want to mention any product here. You assess it from the point of production to the point where it appears that it comes to an end. How long, what's the duration, and what is the environmental impact, negative or positive environmental impact of particular product, of particular ICT services? What is their life cycle? There has to be specific assessments. It is when this sort of assessments are done for products that we in Nigeria can understand how particular devices, how particular services in our ICT sector are having impact on our environment. The advantage of that is that we would be making regulations blindly. The government then knows how to make policies. The government then knows how to enact laws to tackle those kind of devices. The consumers become more aware about the kind of ICT products that they can use that will not have negative impact on the environment. The other thing we can do, you talk about priorities, is carbon footprinting. Carbon footprinting implies assessing, studying, and understanding the level of greenhouse gases emission that happens in relation to the use of particular ICT products or particular ICT services. I give you an example. If this studio, for example, were to be a cyber cafe, has there been a carbon footprint printing? That is to be, has there been an assessment to find out the amount of greenhouse gases that have been emitted because a cyber cafe is stationed here? You see, that way we can begin to understand that we can begin to understand the amount of carbon footprint that cyber cafes may have, the amount of greenhouse gases that might be emitted from certain sizes of cyber cafes. That way, we will also be able to know how to devise alternative means of establishing cyber cafes or alternative means of providing internet services that will have a significantly reduced amount of greenhouse emission. The other thing I think we should prioritize is to embark or bring about policies that enhance what I call material flow assessment. By material flow assessment, I mean the kind of materials, the amount of materials, the nature of the materials that are used to produce certain ICT products. I'm talking beginning from raw materials, when you go pick up raw materials, the processing of the raw materials, the manufacturing of products, the purchase of the product, the use of the products, and all the component materials that are used in them, assessing the various impacts of all of these materials that are used on particular devices. This time around, I use the example of televisions, the electronic devices, and what is the environmental impact? Another example I'll give you in the context of material assessment. Do you realize, in terms of our telecommunication service providers in this country, all of them, so I'm not singling out any, do you realize that all of their masts are powered by generators? All. Yes, all masts. These tall things, they're because of the poor electricity generation stuff that we have in Nigeria. They have to augment by powering them with generator. Have we ever carried out an assessment of how these particular generators that are powering this mast are negatively impacting the environment, so as to find out whether there can be other alternative ways that these telecom industries can power their mass, for example, through solar. So that is the kind of assessment I am suggesting. The other one, okay, you're talking about priority areas. I think this is the 5th priority areas that I'm going to be suggesting, is e-waste assessment, electronic waste assessment. You can call it digital waste assessment. Have we as a nation, have we as states, have we as local government areas, have we as business entities assess the quantum of electronic waste or digital waste that we're generating? Have we assessed the impact of this waste on the environment? Because if we do this, we will be better poised to know how we can reduce the impact of our consumption of electronic materials, communication materials, and information materials or digital materials. We can better inform to know how to use them, how to dispose them in a manner that is responsible and environmentally friendly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barnabas. And I mean, when we started this conversation, you talked about how research advances all areas of our life. And, as we get on with this conversation, looking at this priority area, you sort of have put it in practice. So you don't have to be, a full-time researcher to begin to think of sort of making findings regarding how, your lifestyle or your work base is sort of contributing to the environment. You gave some examples. I know that cyber cafes are not as common as it used to be in the past. But if you're running probably a gym, a spa, a salon, or if you have, I'm proud to say that this studio is run on renewable energy. But if you're running other forms of businesses, how then can you begin to think to say, okay, what's the impact of this business on the environment? And this can begin with little research. It does not have to be mainstream research, but that consciousness, that finding out and then looking for alternative is a form of research. And this is the type of conversation, or this is part of what we strive to achieve with these critical conversations that we have on Greenbytes Wednesdays. I really want to know, are there still other areas that you think, if we had to prioritize research in advancing sustainability in Nigeria, then these are the areas for us to look at, or to sort of take as priority?
Yes. I will begin by saying that we need to imbibe what I refer to as in a particular context of the ICT sector. Imbibe the ideas of, at the national level, at the state level, local government level, but also at the private sector level. Learn how to do something called as life cycle assessment for certain devices that are used in the ICT sector. You take device A, say for example a laptop computer, I don't want to mention any product here. You assess it from the point of production to the point where it appears that it comes to an end. How long, what's the duration, and what is the environmental impact, negative or positive environmental impact of particular product, of particular ICT services? What is their life cycle? There has to be specific assessments. It is when this sort of assessments are done for products that we in Nigeria can understand how particular devices, how particular services in our ICT sector are having impact on our environment. The advantage of that is that we would be making regulations blindly. The government then knows how to make policies. The government then knows how to enact laws to tackle those kind of devices. The consumers become more aware about the kind of ICT products that they can use that will not have negative impact on the environment. The other thing we can do, we talk about priorities, is carbon footprinting. Carbon footprinting implies assessing, studying, and understanding the level of greenhouse gases emission that happens in relation to the use of particular ICT products or particular ICT services. I give you an example. If this studio, for example, were to be a cyber cafe, has there been a carbon footprint printing? That is to be, has there been an assessment to find out the amount of greenhouse gases that are being emitted because a cyber cafe is stationed here? You see, that way we can begin to understand we can begin to understand the amount of carbon footprint that cyber cafes may have, the amount of greenhouse gases that might be emitted from certain sizes of cyber cafes. That way, we will also be able to know how to devise alternative means of establishing cyber cafes or alternative means of providing internet services that will have a significantly reduced amount of greenhouse emission. The other thing I feel we should prioritize is to embark or bring about policies that enhance what I call material flow assessment. By material flow assessment, I mean the kind of materials, the amount of materials, the nature of the materials that are used to produce certain ICT products. I'm talking beginning from raw materials, or you go pick up raw materials, the processing of the raw materials, the manufacturing of the products, the purchase of the product, the use of the products, and all the component material that I use in them. Assessing the various impacts of all of this material that I use on particular devices. This time around, I use the example of television, the electronic devices, and they. What is the environmental impact? Another example I will give you in the context of material assessment. You realize, in terms of our telecommunication service product providers in this country, all of them, so I'm not singling out any, you realize that all of their masts are powered by generators. All. Yes, all mast. These tall things, yeah. They are powered because of the poor electricity generation stuff that we have in Nigeria. They have to augment by powering them with generator. Have we ever carried out an assessment of how these particular generators that are powering these masts are negatively impacted the environment, so as to find out whether there can be other alternative ways that these telecom industries can power their mass, for example, through solar. So that is the kind of assessment I have suggested. The other one, you're talking about priority areas. I think this is the fifth priority area that I'm going to be suggesting, is e-waste assessment, electronic waste assessment. You can call it digital waste assessment. Have we as a nation, have we as states, have we as local government areas, have we as business entities assess the quantum of electronic waste or digital waste that we're generating? Have we assessed the impact of this waste on the environment? Because if we do this, we'll be better poised to know how we can reduce the impact of our consumption of electronic materials, communication materials, and information materials or digital materials. We can be better informed to know how to use them, how to dispose them in a manner that is responsible and environmental. Very friendly. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's been Greenbytes Wednesdays, and we've been speaking with Dr. Sylvanus Barnabas, Senior Lecturer at the Nile University, Nigeria. We've been talking about the role of research when it comes to advancing sustainability in the ICT sector as well as in the energy sector, or with some reference to the energy sector, if I should say. And Greenbytes Wednesdays, what we aim to do with these conversations is to see that these critical conversations can stir up consciousness within you, the listener, or you who is watching, and sort of build up your knowledge when it comes to the digital footprint in Nigeria, to help you understand better Nigeria's technology ecosystem, and to know what are the trends or tools that are advancing the digital sustainability landscape in Nigeria. And we've had this very interesting conversation. We talked a little bit about funding, about open access research, and just to wrap up this conversation, and first I should say thank you for all the insights. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that those watching also have learned and will share with their network. But as we wrap up this conversation, Dr. Barnabas, my last question to you, if we get outside of the academic space a bit, how do you think, or how would you say that research helps us to connect the dots with the practical realities on the ground, with the day-to-day lifestyle of people? And if we think forward, or if you put it in perspective towards the, for example, the Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, or even the African Union Agenda 2063, how would you say that we should very clearly connect the dots between research and the day-to-day lifestyle of people?
Well, that's a very nice and significant question. I also would like to answer the question by giving you a little bit of a metaphorism with this very field of sustainability, and then I'll come to the issue of the dots. You see, the idea of sustainability, the issue to do with the environment, if you look at it, is a multidisciplinary area. So that as a lawyer and as a legal academic, you will think that my primary focus should be studying the law, looking at the legislations, looking at what the courts interpret to be the law at domestic levels and at international levels. But when it comes to the context of the environment, look at it critically. The topic we're looking at, sustainability, responsible use of digital devices or devices in the ICT sector.
And the role of research, yes.
Primarily, that is, if you ask me, a scientific issue. Information and communication technology is a scientific issue, is a technological issue. What has that got to do with a lawyer? Oh yes, it has everything to do with a lawyer, because at the end of the day, you need a lawyer to advise certain government agencies or certain officials of government to be able to enact laws that are effective in regulating the environment. The lawyer is going to need the scientists or the technologies to generate the knowledge about the scientificity of the causes of certain environmental issues, of the way to tackle certain environmental issues, and all the scientific issues. The social scientist is involved. Everybody is involved.
And we need the finances also, like you said, to
you need the banks. You need the banks to find a way about how they can fund, all the financial institutions about how they can fund sustainability projects. That then brings me back to this idea of connecting the dots. So it's a collective responsibility. All the laws, the effective laws that enhance sustainability could be there. But they're of no use if we don't have a citizenry that don't believe in them. So you have a law, it's up there, you've enacted the law, but the citizens do not recognize the law and do not obey the laws. Then what is the essence of the laws? So if also the citizens are not environmentally conscious, if they are not, from where are we going to get the policymakers? Are they going to fall from the sky? From where are you going to get the people who are going to be interested in doing the research that we're talking about? They have to come from members of the public. Where are we going to get the legal academics who are going to stand before students and teach them to understand the ethos of sustainability, whether from a scientific point of view, from a legal point of view, or whatever point of view? They have to come from the public. So whether you like it or not, the dots are naturally connected, because guess what? We're all living in this planet. Climate change, for example, affects everybody. So we say historically and to some extent contemporarily, that certain people or certain sectors, like the oil and gas sector, that are being more culpable in causing climate change than others. But everybody
bears the impacts.
Bears the impact, but also bears responsibility for tackling it. That's why you see in the context of climate change, there is an overarching principle called the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Because climate change is a common challenge. If this earth is no more, it affects everybody. So it's a common responsibility. So the dots idea, even though the responsibilities are differentiated, yours could be as an ordinary citizen carrying placards and campaigning for sustainability in the ICT sector. Mine could be sitting down in the library, reading, and looking at how laws can be generated in order to enhance sustainability in the ICT sector. The other person's own might be taking the cameraman, and going about and filming the dumping of electronic waste in certain areas of the city, so as to raise awareness of regulators or people like you and I, so that we can start to discuss about it. So it is a common responsibility. That's the dot. We're all connected. It is a differentiated responsibility in the sense that we have to come in different ways in order to make our contribution.
Thank you. As we take this conversation to the finish line, what do you think should be the take home? What do you want the listener to keep in mind?
Behavior change.
Behavior change.
Behavior change. Are you a researcher? Behavior change. How? Do the manner in which I conduct my research impact negatively on the environment? In the course of my research, how do I use digital and electronic devices? Does the way I use them have a negative impact? Are there other alternative ways in which I can use my devices in conducting my research that can be more responsible, that can lead to lower energy consumption? At home, are you this kind of person who plugs your phone and then goes to bed and leaves it to overcharge, thereby accelerating the day your device is going to die? That is to say, accelerating the way in which you and the society generate electronic waste. Do you put your devices, your smartphone, your computers on energy saving modes so as to conserve energy? Behavior change. Do you have to drive your car when you know you can walk, thereby reducing your emission of greenhouse gases? So it's behavior change. Are you a company? Are you a corporation? Are you a government agency? Do you have a digital waste management policy in your organization? Are you a managing director? Are you the chief executive of your organization? Have you brought about an e-waste management policy in your organization? So the point I'm saying, the take-home thing is behavior change. Look at yourself, examine yourself, do some sort of introspection, some sort of reflexive self-criticism. How, in what way, in what particular way can I change the way I relate with my information and communication technology gadgets in a manner that contributes to a more safer and sustainable society that we live in? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barnabas. And as you find answers to those questions, I also want to echo that behavioral change, very important, very central to advancing sustainability. One take home from this conversation for me was your postulation of the need for a sustainability development trust fund as against or sort of to complement the existing petroleum development trust fund. And I hope that people that have the ability to influence this will take this very seriously. That's been the package of this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. It's been a pleasure having this conversation about the role of research when it comes to advancing sustainability. Greenbytes Wednesday, remember, is the platform, is that podcast where we have critical conversations. We stir up within you consciousness to also understand the digital landscape in Nigeria, to know the trends and the tools when it comes to digital sustainability. And this is part of our Scale for Net Zero program. Our scale here is Smart Climate Awareness, Learning and Empowerment. Thanks again to the UK government for funds to make this available. And I want to say a very big thank you to the team. Ajibola, Ayo, we have a new friend came in the building today. Wonderful. And to the amazing guys at the Innovate Studio for making this beautiful space available. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. I hope you will listen to other episodes, share with your friends, and you'll continue to do your bits to make the world a better place. Thank you and bye for now. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. This podcast is brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, thanks to funding from the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Have you learned something new? Please share with your network, share with your friends, as I look forward to hosting you on yet another episode of Greenbytes Wednesday next week. Follow us on our social media platforms, check out our courses, test yourself, see how much you know, how much you're learning when it comes to digital and sustainability ecosystem in Nigeria. And I should remind you that as you balance your knowledge of digital ecosystem, also remember to stay committed to a shared and sustainable planet. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. Bye for now.